My name is Aleksej Kišjuhas, and I'm a teaching assistant at the Department of Sociology at the Faculty of Philosophy in Novi Sad. And I teach courses such as social theory, classical sociological theories, contemporary sociological theories, general sociology, social anthropology, introduction to critical thinking, and some others. I'm also a regular columnist for the daily newspaper Danas for more than 7 years now. And I would like to welcome you all here in Novi Sad, since this is my first day here. The main focus of this short lecture would be the nature and the meaning of identity as an important concept in social theory. Special attention would be given to the meaning and importance of regional identities, since this is a summer academy focused on European regions. This issue, I would approach this issue within the framework of identity control theory, as in the first version of the subject of this lecture. And in the end, I will present the emotional foundations and dynamics of identity control, demonstrating that identity and emotions operate within a common framework. Bearing this in mind, I would kindly ask you to think about your identities and the ways that they make you feel. Why do identities generate powerful emotions? This especially happens when our identities are being challenged. For instance, our identity as a male or a female, or as an expert in some field, a sociologist, a football player, a postman, or whatever, or as a Serb, American, Norwegian, Christian, atheist, etc. But also, the question is, what is the source of good feelings or positive emotions when our identities are confirmed and not only challenged and questioned? So, identities are major themes in sociology and social sciences, both at the surface and at the deeper levels of interest. On the surface levels, there was great interest in classical sociology in topics such as class identity, and ethnic, gender, sexual identity in contemporary sociology is a great theme as well, sometimes in a bit faddish manner. However, in structural terms, sociology deals with identities since the time it was born as a discipline. Also, it is important to show that one of the key characteristics of modern society is the fact that we have numerous identities. In traditional societies, we were kind of locked in our family and kinship identities, as well as in a rigid class structure. We were noblemen, we were clergymen, or serfs. While in modern society, we have a sort of an identity boom, where it became possible for us to acquire numerous national, religious, professional, gender, sex, and even regional and local identities. So, as a science, sociology was founded in a situation of an emerging modern society, trying to answer the questions about the challenges of this modernization. In this way, questions of identity are at the core of a sociological tradition. Typical sociological views of identity are usually based on the assumption that every human identity is a social identity as well, that we need other people to confirm that identity, and that we acquire our sense of ourselves through other people in a social context. Individuals, in social terms, are grouped in various ways, including tribes and nations, castes, classes, cultural, regional, local identities, and others. Each group has a specific identity that is being reinforced by the collective ideas, concepts, and notions. Identification and identity in a historical sense changes along with the changes in technology, political systems, and cultures. As was mentioned before, in modern societies, we are what we make of ourselves, which is surely great in one way, but creates some sort of social anxieties in the other. It is so because it makes our identities more fluid. Because of this, they are in the need of constant verification or defense. But we will come back to that. A founder of a modern notion of identity, we usually, as a founder of this concept, we usually consider Erik Erikson, a psychoanalyst and a psychologist, who is remembered by his idea of 8 stages of psychosocial development and a popular concept of identity crisis among the teenagers. For him, for Erikson, what's important for us now, when individuals acquire their identity The way that people interact with the external world must be in compliance with their own internal understandings of themselves and of the world. Subjective sense of identity, this internal feeling, as a feeling of sameness or continuity of such person or persons, was described even in the works of an early psychologist, William James, in the end of 19th century. For James, identity was a sense in which the individual feels active and alive in the deepest and most intense ways. These are the moments, as he wrote, when a certain inner voice says, "This is the real me." Still, the term identity was almost unknown in sociology prior to the 1940s, after which it became a subject of extreme attention and interest, as well as numerous theories and research. Identity in the social sciences emerged as a subject of growing interest in the context of immigration and the emergence of new national and ethnic identities after the World War II, and in parallel with the ongoing social changes, and movements of the 1950s and the 1960s, civil rights movement, counter-cultural movements, women's movements, etc. In other words, the growing importance of identity discourses in the social sciences has run in parallel with the processes of post-war modernization, geographic and cultural mobility, rapid social changes in social roles, and the meanings and expectations which were ascribed to different identities. And this goes without saying for the importance of regional identities as well, when the politics of regionalization became prominent. Bearing this in mind, I would like to present the so-called identity control theory in a short and somewhat crude way, which is a contemporary sociological theory of identity formulated by Peter J. Burke and Jan E. Stetz. The central idea, and I won't bother you much, of this theory makes the assumption that behavior is based on a named and a classified world, and that people in a society classify themselves and each other on the basis of the positions they occupy. It is these labels or names, as well as their expectations of these positions, that become internalized as identities. They make up the self of the individual. In this way, it is fruitful to further elaborate two other concepts: the salience of identity and the commitment to the identity. Identity salience, the word salience, means which identity is the most prominent, most notable, or most important to the individual. Is it their national, their religious, their professional, regional, local, or some other identity? When you ask a person, "Who are you?" what are the first answers that they give? Which is something that's also worth thinking about. It is important to figure out this concept, identity salience, and connected to it, identity commitment, in order to answer the question why people choose some roles instead of some other social roles, or why people devote much of their time and effort into just one area of their life, like families or business. Why do we consider ourselves first, fathers and sons, or first professionals of some sort? Or, some sort of national identities, are we first, Serbs or Christians or Vojvodinians or whatever? So a kind of hierarchy of identities is crucial for determining human behavior, because the character and extent of certain identities directly affects the choices and actions of individuals. In what way? According to the identity control theory, we modify behavior, and this is this italic part, we modify behavior in accordance to the comparison of, 1, other people's perceptions in a situation, and 2, identity standards in a given culture. When it comes to other people's perceptions, these are the inputs from the social situation, factual social feedback from the others. Do we adequately behave as a sociologist, a Serb, a Christian, etc.? Identity standards, as a second variable here, are sets of meanings for an identity. What does it mean to be something in a particular situation? What does it mean to be a member of some social group? What is the meaning of an identity? It's useful to see this system in analogy with a thermostat. This device has some standard, for example, 25 degrees Celsius, and we have some input, such as room temperature, let's say 15 degrees. Comparing these two values, when we put the thermostat on, we have an input that increases the room temperature according to the standard. And as an output, our room temperature in the end is 25 degrees as the standard. In social situations, we do similar stuff. we usually try to harmonize other people's perceptions of us with the identity standards. If someone is, it is most prominent in situations where our identities are being confronted in a way. If someone is, for example, questioning our Christian identity because we've, I don't know, married a Muslim, we will wear a small cross on the necklace to show the world or to advertise our Christian faith. In this way, we are modifying other people's perceptions with the identity standards of what does it mean to be, in this particular example, a Christian. There are numerous situations for these processes, and the most radical ones of identity formation, just one more thing, sorry. In the same way, we may analyze our professional identities also. Professional identities as a sociologist have meanings that you have to know something from the sociology as a science. Our sex identity as a male also has in this particular example, has a set of meanings connected to having, I don't know, certain genitals, short hair, deeper voice, or whatever. So identities work as control systems, which, like I said, control other people's perceptions by harmonizing them with the meanings in identity standards. These are the processes of identity formation, verification, and/or modification. These processes of identity formation and change, there are some radical examples, such as being a prisoner of war camp, being a member of a cult, a radical cult, but also living in a boarding school and stuff like that. Similarly, children have identity standards that are under a great influence of their parents. But parents change and modify their gender identities when they get a newborn baby, for instance, where men gravitate towards more femininity and women towards more masculinity in order to reach some sort of a compromise in a new, particularly stressful situation. So in other words, and this is the basics of the theory, there are some standards, there are some perceptions from the other people, and we try to synchronize them. The key mechanism that operates within this feedback system is fueled by emotions. And this is my last slide. So what is this odd link between identity and emotions? The basic assumption is that verification of identities generates positive emotions, pride, happiness, joy, etc. And the lack of this verification generates negative emotions, anger, anxiety, depression. In this control feedback loop, emotions serve as signals of the level of correspondence between identity perceptions and identity standards. Emotional reactions are the consequences of verification or non-verification of our identities. And the discrepancies between perceptions and standards arouse emotions and motivate individuals to eliminate them, especially discrepancies between the current situation and the identity standard. Picture the thermostat I've mentioned. These are usually the awkward situations when you, I don't know, can't remember a physics formula and you are a physicist, or you are for some reason seen wearing a red lipstick as a male as your neighbors, by your neighbors. Standard emotions for these are shame and embarrassment. In some other situations, when someone questions your ethnic or religious identity, questioning your ethnic roots or the power of your faith, you feel angry, frustrated, aggressive, etc. So in the end, what is important to remember? First, individuals create events in order to confirm the feelings they have about themselves and their identities. Second, if these events do not correspond to their feelings, they will re-identify themselves and others, like in this prisoner of war situation. And in the end, identities are above all sets of meanings that produce emotions. More salient or more prominent identities are the ones that produce more positive emotions. And these identities are the ones we form our strongest commitment to. They become most important to us. All of this raises several important questions I would like to talk about. What is the meaning of regional identities? What does it mean to be, and I would just ask you to think about it. What does it mean to be a Vojvodinian or an Istrian or a Catalan or something else? What is the content of this identity or identity standard, as I said? Furthermore, are our personal identities and behaviors in accordance to these meanings of these regional identities? How do we perform our roles in accordance to them? Do we listen only to local regional music? Do we prefer regional or international cuisine, etc.? What are other people's perceptions of us? Do we perform well as persons of some regional identity? So these are the questions I would like to ask. I would like all of us to ask them ourselves within the context of regional identity. What is the identity salience of regional identity? Do we identify ourselves more on an ethnic, regional, or local level? What is more important to us and why? How committed we are to these regional identities? What identity control theory offers in these questions is the notion that in order to manage identities, including regional identities, and to explain people's behavior in the context of these identities, we have to ask ourselves, what are the identity standards and what are the perceptions of some regional identities? What emotions do they produce and how they reproduce themselves? To conclude, if we want to promote and empower regional identities, we have to evaluate identity standards we promote and to evaluate the meanings of these identities and to find out the emotional dynamics which is underlying these standards. We have to make sure there are no notable discrepancies between identity standards and perceptions of others and their meanings for everyday people. In other words, without the fancy words, we have to make sure citizens really feel their regional identity as a part of their selves. If we fail to do this, regional identities will remain sterile cultural artifacts with no emotional content and without relevance for everyday life. Thank you.